They say that after 30, birthdays aren't about surprises, they're about stability. Smooth champagne, a couple of Slack messages, and, if you're lucky, dinner at a restaurant with decent napkins. I turned 38 this year. Derek and I have been married for 10 years. Not perfect, but stable. Like Keurig coffee, a hint of plastic, but it gets the job done. So here I am, sitting at a table in Maison, a restaurant in downtown Charleston where they don't just bring you water, they explain how it's been filtered. In front of me, a plate of salmon on cauliflower puree, a glass of Prosecco just on the edge of too sweet. And Derek, in a perfectly pressed Brooks Brothers shirt, wearing the face he saves for investor meetings. Serious, composed, detached. He reaches across the table and slides over a small box. Tiffany & Company. Oh, I say, not pretending I don't recognize it. Seriously. Happy birthday, Hales, he says with a smile I haven't seen in a long time. Not because he hides it, because we both stopped looking for it in our conversations. I open the box. At first, I don't understand. No velvet, no ring, no pendant. Just a few sheets of paper folded into quarters. Thick white paper. His name. My name. Title petition for divorce. I look at him. Time doesn't freeze. It just sort of sinks, like foam on a stale latte. I thought this would be more elegant, he says, leaning back in his chair. As if this were a conference presentation. I don't say anything. I don't ask questions. I don't scream. I just gently close the box, put it in my purse, and rise from the table. Haley, don't you want to at least? I want to leave this restaurant, I say calmly, right now. He nods, doesn't try to stop me. That's the thing, he didn't even try. I didn't cry in the cab, didn't call a friend. I just stared out the window. Spanish moss, palm tree shadows, trucks with the words Sweetgrass Roofing. Always found that name oddly ironic. I remembered how, in the early days, he once told me, "You always know how to keep it together. You're strong, I respect that." And then he stopped noticing I was even there. At home, I took off my heels, tossed the dress into the laundry basket, and lay down on the bed. No pillow, just darkness. The box was still in my purse, Tiffany & Company. That signature color. That signature tastes the taste of substitution. You expected a diamond. You got a period. I woke up at 6:47 the next morning, didn't even set an alarm. The kitchen smelled like coffee. He'd made himself a cup and gone for a run. Disciplined, strategic, always calculating. He hadn't forgotten my birthday. He had simply decided it would be elegant to end it on that day. What a gesture. What a cold theatrical gesture. On the fridge was a note. We can talk later this week. I'll be staying at the condo. The condo, our second home in Mount Pleasant. We bought it after his startup got its second round of funding. He always liked dividing life into chapters. Chapter 1, marriage. Chapter 2, growth. Chapter 3, apparently, life without business constraints. In that moment, I didn't feel the urge to take revenge. Didn't want answers. I just felt a strange silence, as if the world had hit pause. And inside it, me. Me, who had given 10 years to this marriage. Helped him build his brand. Gave up my own studio for his dream. Me, who poured in my name, energy, vision without my signature on the incorporation papers. Me, who became an add-on. And now, an aesthetically archived past. But you know what I realized that night? No one is going to save your story except you. Even if it started with a Tiffany box. Even if they handed you divorce under the guise of care, from that moment on, everything changed. I just didn't know how much yet. When we first started dating, Derek used to say we had potential to scale. At first, I thought it was cute startup lingo instead of love notes. Later, I realized he meant it about everything, not just business relationships, friendships, lifestyle. Everything had to be scalable, aesthetic, marketable. He didn't say, "I love you." He said, "We're a strong couple, very marketable." I laughed, thought it was just his way of speaking. But it wasn't a language, it was a framework, a system. He made big gestures. A proposal photo with the Golden Gate in the background. A rented convertible in Malibu. A perfectly cut diamond ring he later posted to stories with the hashtag number #LifeGoals. Then came the wedding in Asheville, up in the mountains. Full Pinterest mode, string lights, a wishing tree, slow-motion clips set to Bon Iver. The morning after the ceremony, he told me, "This is going to get so many likes." I smiled, but something inside felt off. Like we hadn't just started a marriage, we'd launched a campaign. When we moved to Charleston, he started building a team for his first startup. A fintech thing, accessible liquidity for the self-employed or something. And he kept saying, "I need a partner, not just a wife, someone who gets it." Back then, I ran my own design studio. I had clients on both coasts, packaging and branding contracts, even a couple of features in Dyeline, which, if you're a designer, you know is legit. But he said, "Don't you want us to be a real team?" Of course. Then maybe put the studio on pause for now. Help with the deck, the platform design, the pitch visuals. And I agreed. Because I loved him. Because I believed. Because I thought, if we're building a future together, this is the investment. I designed the interface, helped with branding, created the logo that ended up in TechCrunch, just without my name on it. He said, "You're my secret weapon, the edge." Then came the investor dinners. At those, he'd ask me to stay in the background. Just don't interrupt, okay? These guys are old school. They need to see I'm the lead. I don't interrupt. Just avoid diving into UX details. It's too technical for them. I'd sit there and nod, listening to him explain the design solutions I made, the brand concept that was mine. He never said we, only I. But I told myself, this is a phase. Later, when things settle, he'll give me a spotlight. Later, we'll be true partners. Then came the second round of funding. The company grew. He started saying, "We're on the map now." He hired a PR agency. They rewrote his bio on the website. In the origin story section, no mention of our kitchen table, where we brainstormed user flows late at night. No mention of me. I asked, "Where am I?" He said, "Well, it's not about the personal, it's about perception." Perception. Sometimes I felt myself slowly disappearing. Not with drama, not with noise, just quietly. Like a shadow at sunset. He always knew how to make everything look good. In posts, he called me his rock star wife. But in reality, I was the back end. No access, no login. He never hit me. Never yelled. He just arranged things so that you'd quietly step out of the frame. At first by choice. Then by habit. And now, in a Tiffany box, he placed a period. With presentation logic. With the aesthetic of divorce. Because even endings to him are a launch. A new version release of his life. But you know what, Derek? If you thought I'd just vanish from the story, you forgot one thing. I wasn't the background. I was the architect. And now, it's my turn to launch something. Something real. No investors. No fake we. Just me and for me. 2 days after the gift in the Tiffany & Company box, he came home again. As if nothing had happened. Saturday, down at the kitchen island, opened his MacBook, took a sip of his favorite vanilla cold brew, and said, "Hale, let's just get this done fast, and like adults, okay?" I was standing by the sink, washing a cup. It cracked the one from Cappadocia. We bought it during our retreat. Back when he used to call me the center of his universe? Right. Fast and like adults, I repeated. Meaning no unnecessary emotions, right? Just rational, respectful. I don't want to drag this out. And with elegant signatures, I assume? Yeah, we're civilized people after all. He said the lawyer had everything ready. All I had to do was sign. Simple, convenient DocuSign. Like clicking accept on terms and conditions. He even added, "I made sure you got a generous deal. Really, it's a very fair package." I held back a smile. Because I knew. When a man starts emphasizing how generous he's being, you better reread the fine print. That night, I didn't sleep. I opened the documents. Started with the top layer. Asset list, division agreement, the emotionally sterile language like, Party A shall retain rights to all assets pertaining to Brooks LLC and associated real property. You know what that means? That his entire business, the house, the King Street studio, it's all under his LLC. An LLC built with my money, by the way. Back when I closed my studio and he called it an investment in our future. Now it's a separate legal entity, not subject to division. I remembered sitting with the architect, choosing the tile for the office, building the mood board, coordinating with Savannah suppliers to meet the opening deadline. But in the documents, not a single mention of my input. As if I was never there. As if I'd just been serving tea in the corner of the stage. The next day, he came again. Nice shirt. Morning optimism. I already knew what was coming. Hale, let's not make this complicated, okay? Just sign. Be an adult. I closed the laptop and looked at him. You're right. It was a gift. Just unexpected. Glad you see it that way. But I'd like to add something of my own. He stiffened. What do you mean? While you were structuring your LLCs, I was doing something too. Like saving every email, every contract listing me as creative lead, every transfer made from my account. You didn't really think I just trusted blindly, did you? His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just that little crease between his brows. His code error. You want to go to court? Number, I want to be precise. And adult. I told you you're getting generous terms. No, Derek, I'm getting fair ones. Because now, I've read the fine print too. And I have a pen. My own. That night, I signed nothing. Instead, I wrote to my lawyer, the first one I chose for myself, a woman who used to handle intellectual property cases. Because everything I created is mine again. I'm no longer the shadow. I'm the signature. Bold. Certain. With a flourish on the last letter. Have you ever sorted your life into subfolders? I have. The same night I realized this so-called elegant divorce was just a cover for a clean-cut expropriation, I opened my laptop and created a folder. I named it Before the Exit. At first out of spite. Then out of calculation. It wasn't just in case. It was in case of the truth. Because something in my gut said, if I didn't gather the facts, my name would vanish just like it had from his pitch deck at that last Austin Expo. I started with the easiest part. Email. Gmail folder. Derek pre-launch. A $3,200 invoice for his logo rebranding, paid with my card. Contract with a San Francisco designer signed by me on behalf of his LLC. My draft presentations explaining the market segmentation for female audiences, which he later described in interviews as his insight. Photos from early investor meetings. Guess whose hand is holding the clicker? Next phone notes. Because like an idiot, I was jotting down ideas for his strategy in my notes app. He used to say, "You're my silent genius. No one sees visual context like you." And then joke in front of others. I just asked my wife to take a look. She's got a better eye for colors. Yeah, I had an eye. For colors. For communication. For the psychology behind perception. I wasn't just his wife. I ran my own design studio. Before him. Before our business. Before he convinced me to pause everything for our shared future. Then Slack messages. Screenshots of me negotiating collabs with influencers. Sending him packaging concepts. Defining the brand's tone of voice. And him replying, "Perfect, I'll tweak and present it as mine. They'll love it more this way, lol." LOL? No, Derek. It's not LOL. It's Exhibit B. Then bank statements. A separate Excel tab. Personal charges related to Derek's business. I'm not a lawyer, but I know how to document. And I can count. I invested nearly $58,000 of my own money into this project. No contract. No credit. Only faith. This wasn't just ours. It was mine. Until he wrapped it in his last name and filed for divorce with generous terms. When I finished the first phase, the before the exit folder was 2.4 gigabytes. Scans, invoices, presentations. The word draft sat in the header of almost every file. But now they were evidence. And the irony? Every file was neatly sorted just how he liked things. Because I was always so good at organizing things behind the scenes. I hadn't sent the archive to anyone yet. Not even to my lawyer. Just stored it. On an encrypted flash drive and in a cloud with two-factor authentication. Because sometimes protection isn't loud. It's orderly. And you know what I felt when I closed the laptop? Not anger. Not fear. Respect. For myself. Because for the first time in a long time, I saw the full picture. Not through the prism of us, but through the facts, where I wasn't a casualty, but a creator. This wasn't a divorce folder. It was a folder of reality. I didn't expect Nicole to be the first one who actually heard me. We hadn't spoken in over 2 years. We were close in college, she studied law, and always knew how to extract the truth from a pile of bureaucratic noise. And then life, work, distance. But that night, I was scrolling through LinkedIn, saw her profile, Nicole Halston, JD Corporate Counsel, IP and Startup Law, Atlanta. And, without much hope, I sent her a message. Maybe you can help me, not as a friend, as a lawyer. 20 minutes later, my screen lit up. Incoming FaceTime Nicole. She was sitting on her balcony, glass of Pinot Grigio in hand, the lights of Atlanta behind her. Honey, she said without even saying hello, you are the face of the brand. You just never saw the mirror. I told her everything. About the Tiffany box, the papers, the let's keep it classy. About the before the exit folder. About how it felt like being ripped out of a life you helped build, like a nail torn from wood. No care, just force. And now there's a hole. Nicole listened silently. Sometimes she winced, sometimes she took notes. When I finished, she said, "You were a co-founder, just not on paper. But legally? Legally, it's about evidence. And you have it. Derek wanted things to look elegant? Well, so can we, with legal citations." 2 days later, I was on a call with Clara Bennington, an attorney in Atlanta specializing in asset and partnership disputes. Her website read, "I handle complicated exits, personal and corporate." We met on Zoom. She was sharp like a blade, but with a kind of maternal steadiness. She listened, reviewed my screenshots and files. "Haley, he counted on you leaving quietly because you weren't on paper. But paper isn't everything. Your contributions are provable. And yes, you're entitled to part of the business, the assets, and the brand's appraised value." I felt a lump rise in my throat. Because it was the first time I heard not be the bigger person, not just sign, but, "You have a right." "Afraid he'll start a war?" Clara asked. I nodded. She leaned slightly toward the camera. "You're not invading. You're reclaiming." A pause. "And this time, your move will come in a box too, just not with a ring, with a subpoena." I didn't cry. I just felt something solid come back under my feet. Not revenge. Not rage. Just a return, quiet, methodical, and legally sound. That evening, I texted Nicole. "You know you're the only one who could say face of the brand and make it sound like both a verdict and a hug?" She replied with a meme. "Get your equity, girl." And I knew. This wasn't just going to be a divorce. This was going to be a restoration. Not just of my name. Of my stake. My story. Me. Clara Bennington's office smelled like fresh paper, sugarless coffee, and something that resembled confidence. I signed the divorce papers at 9:07 a.m. And at 9:10, the petition for intellectual property division. "Are you sure?" Clara asked. "Yes." "You realize he won't just be angry. He'll mobilize everyone, the board, lawyers, the media." I looked her in the eye. He chose graceful. Now it's going to be real. It started with a letter to his attorney. Then came the official filing in Charleston County. Haley Monroe versus Derek Monroe petition for divorce and intellectual property division. I wasn't just asking for a stake. I listed points of contribution. The product's visual identity, the slogan, built for quiet geniuses, the seed round pitch deck structure, the first media pitch to Fast Company, the MVP design. This wasn't emotion. It was a system. My system. Derek didn't hear it from me. He heard it from his funding partner John Barker, the same nice old guy from San Francisco who was at our wedding and held the champagne glass when Derek said, "Haley is my anchor." Now John called him and said, "So, she finally speaks, huh?" And added, "You should have kept the anchor. Now your ship's about to list." He was furious. He didn't yell. Derek's not the yelling type. He sent me a short email, dry as a squeezed-out lemon. "This is extremely disappointing. I thought we agreed on keeping this dignified." I didn't reply. I just posted a story on Instagram, a Forbes Women cover with the headline, "You can be graceful and strategic, especially when they expected neither." A week later, the whispers started. One investor unfollowed him on LinkedIn. In a startup Slack group, someone leaked a screenshot of his pitch deck, featuring the logo I designed back in 2018. Next to it, someone wrote, "Designed by the silent partner? Not so silent anymore." Messages started coming in. "Were you really a co-founder? So you wrote those first texts on the website. He always showed you as the wife, but now damn." I didn't argue. I just started speaking. On the podcast Women Build It, I shared my story for the first time. What it's like to stand beside a man who calls you his muse, but edits you out of every pitch. About 3 a.m. coffee, the slide decks. The kind of courage that doesn't come with shouting but with Dropbox folders. The host asked, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" I said, "Because I used to think silence was respect. Now I realize silence is an invitation to be erased." And this wasn't revenge. It wasn't drama. It was just the truth. And my voice finally at full volume. I recorded that video at night. In the kitchen, with a cup of rooibos and just the overhead light above the sink. No makeup, no filters. My voice wasn't bitter, just tired, honest, a little ironic. He gave me a Tiffany box for my birthday. It didn't have earrings. It had divorce papers. I didn't scream. I opened Dropbox and showed who really built the company. Pause, a smile. He gave me divorce papers in a Tiffany box. I gave him discovery files in a Dropbox folder. I posted it and turned my phone off. By morning, it had 213,000 views. By lunch, 1.2 million. By evening, BuzzFeed had an article. "Designer wife outsmarts tech husband with Dropbox receipts." My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. One friend texted, "You're in TikTok of the week." Another, "Bad Wives Club mentioned you in their new episode, literally in the first 2 minutes." And then something happened I didn't expect. The comments. Hundreds, then thousands. I stayed silent too, while he ran his startup from my apartment. He called me his support system while I did all the marketing. "Thank you, Haley. You're not just speaking for yourself, you're speaking for all of us." Women of all ages, cities, accents. From Minneapolis, I cried, not from pain, from finally feeling seen. From Austin, I had a Dropbox too. Thank you for not burning down but building up. One woman from Seattle sent a screenshot. Look familiar? And a file titled, "Before the exit v1.zip." I laughed and cried at the same time. Of course, Derek found out. He called. I didn't answer. He texted, "You're making a circus out of a private matter." I waited 3 days. Then replied with one sentence. "When you put papers in a Tiffany box, you made it public, Derek. I just added the facts." Then came the mini memoirs. Posts under number Dropbox Divorce. Videos of women sharing photos, working late on laptops, helping with pitch decks, running SMM. Now with captions like, "I was the invisible partner too, not anymore." A week later, I was invited to Bad Wives Club, the podcast I used to listen to in secret when I felt especially alone. We laughed. I told them how I ran my husband's Instagram while he told investors they had a separate comms team. I said, "I thought I was supporting, but now I know I was the foundation. He just never signed the blueprint with my name." Then there was a pause, and the host asked, "What would you say to yourself a year ago?" I thought for a second, then answered, "Don't be afraid to be loud. You're not overreacting. You're remembering who you are." That whole episode wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. Yes, it was public. But not because I wanted likes. Because silence doesn't protect anymore. And truth, spoken out loud, is already halfway to freedom. The trial lasted 6 months. It wasn't courtroom drama with yelling and glass throwing. It was more like a spreadsheet, an Excel file with blood beneath the cells. Derek hired an expensive legal team out of Midtown. I showed up with a lawyer recommended by a friend. A black woman with braids and a gaze that could burn through an NDA. Martha Reeves, my sword and shield. She didn't say much, but when she did, it landed. "Your Honor, we're not disputing his genius. We're proving hers." When the judge gave the final ruling, I didn't feel not euphoria, not revenge. Just balance. The court recognized. No, my 27% stake in the startup based on IP and marketing contributions. Copyright for the original logo and brand identity, the ones I designed on the balcony of our old Charleston apartment. 2 equity in the house. He quietly shifted to his LLC. Compensation for lost earnings from the first 2 funding rounds. I could have taken more. Martha said, "You've earned it." But I told her, "I don't want everything. I just want what's mine." And I chose something else. A place where I could start over. And not feel like a footnote in someone else's origin story. I sold my share. In exchange for complete freedom. Moved to Asheville, North Carolina. A town that smells like coffee, wood, and wet slate. Where people smile on the street not for networking. I rented a studio in an old print shop building. Bought a used MacBook and a handmade desk from a local carpenter. Launched my own brand. Boxed and Free. The name came from 2 moments. The Tiffany box where he hid the divorce, and the freedom I wrapped and claimed for myself. My first client was a cafe run by a couple from Texas. They needed a full rebrand logo, menu, packaging. They said, "We love your style. Feels personal." I almost said, "Oh, it's very personal." But I just smiled and opened Illustrator. By the 3rd month, the site was live. Inquiries started coming in. From startups, from artists. From women who had given away their voice, and were now reclaiming it through design. I didn't make a spectacle out of the past. But on the About page, there was one line. I design in a way that shows who you are even if no one saw it before. One day, I got a package. No Tiffany logo. Just brown cardboard with "From a fan" written in Sharpie. Inside a note card. "You showed me you can lose a husband and a brand and still find yourself. Thank you for Boxed and Free. I'm getting divorced too, and I'm not scared." The world didn't end. It recalibrated. Not all at once, not perfectly. But honestly, and if you ask me what I got after the divorce, I'll say, my name, my login, and my face on the homepage. It's been a 1.5 years since I closed the door on my old life. Since then, everything has changed on the outside, and more importantly, within me. It wasn't just a change of city or a rebrand. It was a shift from survival to living. One day, Fast Company reached out for an interview. The topic, the invisible labor of women when partners and co-founders stay in the background. And I thought, finally, someone's talking about what I've felt for years. In a studio in downtown Atlanta, I told my story. Not about the divorce, but about the quiet work women do in relationships and in business, The kind that goes unnoticed, unthanked, unseen. How what's labeled as support is often the very foundation of someone else's empire. I said, living isn't about being convenient or comfortable. It's about being real, even if it shakes the table. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a design forum also in Atlanta. There I introduced a collection called Hidden Work. It featured interior pieces, lamps, tables, vases, all made from recycled documents, contracts, invoices, old letters. Each item told a story, from silence and invisibility to voice and recognition. At the entrance, there was a sign. Built with silence, rebuilt with voice. People stopped, they read, they asked questions. For some, it was a revelation. For others, a quiet validation. And I realized this journey was never about pleasing everyone. It was about no longer being convenient. It was about becoming true. After the forum, a young woman approached me. She said, "You helped me see that my work matters even if my husband or my boss doesn't acknowledge it." Her words lit something in me. Like fuel. There was no bitterness in this new chapter. Just resolve. To live not as a background character, but as an active force. I don't stay silent anymore. I build. And I build in a way that others can hear and see, even the parts that used to hide in the shadows. And now, I'm here. Not just with a brand. Not just with a backstory. But with a mission. To make visible what so often goes unseen. And this is my new home. Built not for comfort, but for truth. Exactly 1 year has passed since the day I found divorce papers in a Tiffany box. A year filled with tears, struggle, and unexpected victories. Today is my birthday. The house is quiet, the morning bright. My son, Jaden, 10 years old now, my little hero and my greatest source of inspiration. He comes to me holding a handmade card. Pride and tenderness shine on his face. On the card it says, "To the strongest woman I know." I smile, and tears well up in my eyes. I set down a cup of hot coffee and turn on the oven. Today I'm baking my own cake, no orders, no favors. While the batter rises, I open Instagram and start typing. Last year I got divorce papers in a Tiffany box. This year I got peace, clarity, and my name back. Best gift ever. I add the hashtag, #rewrap yourself. Because sometimes the most precious gifts aren't jewels in boxes, but the ability to wrap yourself anew in the story you want to live. Jaden wraps his arms around my waist and whispers, "Mom, you're the coolest." I hug him back and realize this is my true gift. This year has taught me, gifts come in many forms. Sometimes painful, sometimes unexpected. But the most important are those that help you find yourself again. And now, when I look in the mirror, I don't just see a woman who went through a divorce. I see a woman who found strength, voice, and freedom within herself. That is what a true gift means. I finish writing, set my phone aside, pull the cake out of the oven, and I know. This isn't an end, it's the beginning of a new life. And I'm ready to meet it with an open heart.